So today is the first session, so it'll be pretty light. It's going to be talking more about the process in terms of applying for grad school. So for many of you, I imagine you've already thought about this. So it'll be more about talking about sort of what kind of things you will need to do to apply for grad school. Like how do you handle references? How do you get transcripts? And then also thinking about scholarship and awards as well, because that's something you'll need to apply in parallel to your grad school application as well. So today will be more like an intro, and then on Wednesday we'll be talking about the CV, and then Friday we'll be talking about the personal statements. So in terms of so we're just talking about like why graduate school, and it's especially important when you are looking to apply for graduate programs that you know what motivates you. So what we often tell people is if you go to grad school because society tells you to, because your parents or your friends are telling you to do it, because your friends are doing it, so you feel pressured to do it, or you feel like this is something that's expected of you. It's generally not the best reason to go to graduate school, because when you write your personal statement, it will come across that you don't really know why you're going to grad school. So it's really important to know sort of what motivates you to go to grad school. What are your aspirations with it? What do you want to do with the degree? Do you need it because, for example, if you're going to OT, it's something that you need. If you're going into other professions, you may not need the graduate program or the graduate degree. So making sure that you have a really clear idea of why you're going into graduate school is really important. Is it about income, salary? If so, it's great. Probably not something you want to mention in a statement, but something to keep in the back of your mind. So be able to think critically about why you're wanting to go into graduate school is important, because if you're able to articulate that really well, then it bodes well for your personal statement, because you're able to tell a story about why you want to go into a specific graduate program or a specific graduate degree. And in terms of actually applying for a graduate program, doing the research is really important. So I'm sure all of you have done it in terms of looking at the websites for the different programs extensively and getting a sense of what's on there. So looking at the FAQs, looking at the school itself, looking at the mission, the vision, the goal, looking at recent news items, looking at sort of the current student information there. Sometimes they post sort of the timetables and the courses that are available to everyone, getting a sense of what student life is like at that particular program. So being able to look at the website is really important. Also, don't be afraid to ask the school or the program for questions you may have, especially if they're not on the website. So my caveat here is if you're going to ask some questions, make sure that you do your research beforehand, and make sure that you don't ask a question like, what is the minimum GPA to apply for the program? Because it's a really simple, basic question that's going to be available on the website. So making sure that when you do ask questions that you've already done the research and that it's not on the website already. Also, don't be afraid to connect with current graduate students who are in the program itself. That may be good information to get a sense of what it's like to be to be a student in the program, because that can differ from sort of what you're expecting in a graduate program. Also, now working with alumni and faculty, so talking to, especially if you're going to a research-based program, be able to talk to faculty, getting a sense of who you may want to work with, and maybe one of them can also endorse you or support you in your application for the program. Talking to alumni in terms of where they go, especially knowing sort of what are the outcomes for people who graduate from the program. That's also important. And if you're able to like talk to professionals in the field as well. So if you're looking to go into a specific profession like OT or something in psychotherapy, then be able to talk to people, talk to occupational therapists, and get a sense of what their day-to-day is like. Also looking into like news articles and reports on the industry and area, and getting a sense of what is the industry, especially during a pandemic. It's important to know sort of what is the general trend in the next couple of years, especially knowing that we've got a recession, we're currently in a recession and likely will last a little bit longer. So getting a sense of what is the future outlook of that industry, and if you graduate from the program, what kind of job will be available afterwards. And also be careful about informal online spaces like Reddit, social media platforms, and grad cafes. They can be useful, but they can also make you really, really anxious because it is students, and then it's all of sort of the students applying for graduate programs. And sometimes if one person panics, like everybody panics. So making sure that if you do use the resources, great, but take it with a grain of salt, especially if people are saying like, oh, I had this GPA and this experience and I got admitted to this program, but then this school rejected me. Take that with a grain of salt because generally there's a lot of other things that are going on. So try not to be too anxious or have your feelings dictated by the informal online spaces. And then some basics of applying. I'm sure all of you are aware of this, but just want to go over this quickly. So making sure you read the application instructions carefully, especially if you're applying for multiple programs and multiple schools. All of them will likely differ from each other by a little bit. So making sure that you know the instructions and for every single program that you apply for and for every single school that you apply for, and making sure that you do so in a way that sort of is structured and won't confuse you in the future. Also understanding the admission requirements. So knowing in terms of what courses, what pre-req courses you'll need to take, if you need to take a specific course in order to apply, make sure you do that beforehand, making sure you know the GPA requirements. And it's also especially important if you know that you might not quite hit the mark for one of the requirements and you decide to continue to apply, then making sure that the rest of the application is strong. So for example, if a GPA is weaker than what they would expect, but if you're able to compensate that with a really strong experience, with really strong work experience, and also really a high score on a standardized test, and that may be able to compensate for a lower GPA. So knowing that is really important beforehand. And again, if you need to ask for clarifications on those instructions, feel free to email or contact the graduate program for those clarifications. You also want to give yourself enough time to complete the documents. So the application form itself, also the personal statements, the CV, references, and getting official transcripts, all those things require time, and making sure that you know how long it takes to get those documents in order is really important. And lastly, I would say also have others review your application. So whether it be myself, whether it be your friends, whether it be your professors, your references, have them look over your application is really important. And I would also suggest that if you have people here that you sort of connected with during those breakout groups, see if you would be open to connecting with each other and be able to help each other with their applications too. So it's always good to apply in groups rather than by yourself. So in terms of the specific elements of applying for graduate programs, first of all, filling out the application form itself. So generally just filling out your information, your name, maybe asking some questions, but good to know that. And often it's sort of the online application system. So it's good to get that started and getting a sense of what that is like beforehand. Obtaining official academic transcripts. Generally now they're all electronic transcripts. So generally the turnaround is pretty quick, but also knowing that you need to do that before the deadline. If you went to multiple schools, so if you went to school beyond the University of Toronto, making sure that you get those transcripts, that you get those transcripts from those other schools as well is important. And also knowing that there's a cost to it as well, so it's not free. Resumes and CV, which we'll talk about on Wednesday. Your personal statement, which we'll talk about on Friday. Your reference letters, I'll talk about right after this slide. And then other elements that may be required for your program may be standardized testing. So the MCATs, the LSAT, the GRE. Some of these, the GRE especially, it might be waived this year because of the pandemic, but good to make sure that you know what the criteria is for this year. The GRE generally is more for American schools. They're not so much for Canadian schools, but some of the programs may still require it. You may also need to submit a writing sample. So getting a sense of what kind of papers you've written. If you submitted any articles for publication, that could be a good way to have a writing sample as well. And then some of them may also have interviews too. So that you will also need to prepare for. So in terms of references, I would say the key thing is it can be difficult trying to pick references. So when you think of references, always think about the quality of the reference rather than the title of the person who's giving the reference, because you want the reference letter to be strong. If it's a little weak or tepid, it's not going to bode well for you, because oftentimes a lot of people have strong references. So making sure that you pick professors and faculty who know you pretty well and have also given you a good grade for a class. So if someone gave you, say, a B- for a class, that might not be the best reference. So when possible, trying to pick someone who's giving you strong grades, ideally an A+, an A, or an A-. If possible, try to pick someone in the upper years, so 300, 400 level courses, over 200 level courses. But if the 300 level instructor will likely give you a weaker reference because your grade wasn't so well, it might be best to pick the 200 level professor who gave you an A+, because again, the quality of the reference really is important. And we just talked about this as well. I think Georgia might have mentioned this before, in terms of being able to connect with their professors now, especially for those in third year. It may be difficult finding those ways to connect with their professors organically, but it's also really important to do so, even if it's just sort of going to the office hours, even if it's emailing them, even if it's setting up some time outside of office hours and outside of classes to talk to them. Being able to maintain that connection is really important. And also, when your ASHA references, start early. So generally the standard I would say is think 4 weeks before it's due. If you're able to give them a heads up even earlier, go for it, depending on the relationship. So for example, if you work for a professor, then you may want to mention it a little bit earlier. But generally 4 weeks before the deadline is important to give them time to prepare the letter and to think about the letter, and also give them time to procrastinate the letter as well. And then when you're asking for references, don't just ask them for the reference saying, hey, Dr. Smith, I'm looking to apply for grad school. Could you write me a letter? Okay, thanks, bye. You want to give them a little bit more information about, first of all, remind them who you are. So especially if it's someone that you took a class with last year, they may not fully remember who you are. So making sure that you remind them that, hey, my name is this. I'm looking to apply for grad school. And then sort of give them a lowdown of like who you are, send them your resume or CV, send them any assignments you had with them during that class. So if you wrote a paper for that class and got an A+, attach the paper onto the email, and also if you can attach the comments that they provided at that time. If you have a statement, feel free to attach that as well so they have an idea of why you're applying for grad school. But in the email, generally, have a short paragraph stating why you're applying for grad school and what your goals are with the degree, just so they have an idea of what your motivations are. And if there's anything specific you want them to highlight in terms of skills you want them to mention or experiences that you want them to mention, make sure you talk about that as well. So with those skills, it's good to be able to talk about sort of the skills that may be mentioned on the reference instructions. So for some programs, they may provide you the reference instructions. So in terms of things that they want in a letter, they may also have a reference form that will highlight sort of the key skills that they want from an applicant. So be able to say that upfront in an email is important. And lastly, it's okay to remind them frequently. Sometimes they need that nudge, so don't feel like you're bothering them excessively. They'll understand that you're applying for grad school and that with that comes with anxiety and panic that they may not be able to submit it in time. So if you send them the initial email first beforehand, give them a week or two, send them another reminder after, and then sort of send them weekly until the deadline. And on the week of the deadline, feel free to send them multiple emails during that week as well. So yeah. So as we all know, grad school is not free, unfortunately. It costs money. It's maybe cheaper than your undergrad and maybe more expensive depending on the program, but there is a cost to it. So it's important whenever possible to try to find awards, find scholarships, find different ways to fund your graduate program journeys. So one of the key things to look for is like going to the department or the program websites. Many universities will have an awards portal of some sort. So this is the one, for example, this is an example of the awards portal at U of T. So being able to go through that, going through the department website and seeing what kind of funding is available. A lot of programs will have entrance scholarships of some sort. The amount will differ based on the program. So making sure that you sort of have an idea of what kind of awards are available for entering students in the graduate program. And if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask the graduate administrator or the graduate program itself to clarify those awards and the scholarships that are available. For those who are in research-based programs, just be cautious of those programs that don't provide any support at all. Or if they don't generally provide an entryway for their master's students to go into the PhD programs, it's just sort of a flag that you may want to look for. Because I would say a lot of research-based programs that have some kind of support or funding, whether that be actual money, research assistantships, teaching assistantships, whatever those are, they generally have some kind of support available, but if they don't provide anything, that's something worth thinking about when applying. Also want to talk about sort of the two big external awards offered by the government. So the federal government through the Canada Graduate Scholarship, and then the provincial government here in Ontario through the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. These are generally only for programs within Canada. So if you're applying for international schools or schools outside of Canada, then these won't really apply. But it's good to know them just in case you are applying for schools at U of T and elsewhere, so whether it be UBC, McGill, University of Alberta, whatever it is. So first, I'll talk about the Canada Graduate Scholarship Master, so the CGSM. So it's a one-year scholarship. It's non-renewable. So $17,500 for 1 year. And it's only for programs that have a significant research component. And that's the quotes directly from the website. So it could mean a thesis. It could also mean different programs. Another question, so would they apply if the dual degree program that's required to do abroad? So if the program is based in Canada, then this will apply. There's also actually another supplemental part for the CGSM where you can apply to help fund your research abroad. So that could apply, yeah. So it has to be enrolled or you have applied or will apply for a graduate program at an institution with CGSM allocation. So what that means is every year the federal government allocates a certain number of scholarships for a certain number of major Canadian universities across the country. So for example, they'll give 360 spots to U of T. They might give 100 something to York, maybe 100, maybe 90 or something to Ryerson, 200 to UBC. And essentially that's the allocation for the entire school. So they're really competitive scholarships. And within the university, they'll they'll divvy up their allocations to all the different faculties. So for U of T 360, they might give say 100 to, I don't know, arts and science. They may give 50 to business or like 40 to medicine or something. And then the faculty would then divvy that up between the departments. So what that means is if an institution doesn't have any allocation from the federal government, then you can't apply for the CGSM to that institution. So generally they refer to more smaller schools, smaller universities that don't have intensive research activities, and they likely will not have CGSM allocations. But if they're big universities, then generally, yes, they will have CGSM allocations. So just make sure that the institution you apply for has CGSM allocations. They also require first class average in the final 2 years, so quote unquote first class average. Generally, that would mean an A-, but it depends on the institution. So making sure that you double check with the program to see how they define first class average. Unfortunately, this is only available for Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So if you're an international student, then you wouldn't be able to apply for the CGSM. You also cannot move an award from one institution to another. So when you apply, you can list up to 3 institutions to receive a CGSM. Let's say you pick U of T, U Ottawa, and York. Let's say you got the award for U Ottawa. You can't move the U Ottawa award to U of T because that award that you got is only specific to U Ottawa. So just know that if you got the scholarship, congratulations, you can only use it for that specific institution that's given to you. The deadline is coming up December 1st, but make sure you ask the department to make sure that you have all the deadlines. So it's coming up pretty quickly, so it might be a little too soon, but it's worth a shot to see if you're able to get your application in order. Okay, yeah, so the criteria. So there's the application itself, which is through the NSEC portal, which Georgia had mentioned before. It's not the most intuitive website, it's a lot of text. But there's an application. There's also the CV, which they use, the Canadian Common CV. It's like a CV, but probably 10 times more annoying, 10 times more frustrating because it's really specific and very structured and actually lots of information. So make sure you give time to that. It's also not something that you can sort of upload. It's through a specific portal that they have. So it's also required transcripts, and they also require a research proposal that sort of talks about what kind of research you would like to conduct in that graduate program. And they also want 2 reference letters as well. So in case of references, if you are applying for the CGSM, I would say if you haven't sent out your request yet, send them now if possible, because that does require time for them to be able to complete those reference letters. In terms of the criteria, 50% on academic excellence based on your transcripts generally, also course load, grades, comparison to class average and whatnot. 30% on research potential, so getting a sense of the quality and the originality of your contributions to the research field. This can be taken from your research proposal and also from your experiences in your CV that you listed. So especially if you have any experience with research, if you've been published anywhere, that would be considered as part of that criteria. And then 20% on your personal characteristics and interpersonal skills. So that would be generally taken from your transcript in terms of your work experience and also from your reference letter as well. So the next one, I won't go too much into it because the deadline's already passed, but there's also a doctoral version of the Canada Graduate Scholarships. It's more money, and you can have it for up to 3-4 years depending on the program that you're in. Something to consider about more for next year if you're applying, if you're thinking about a PhD program at some level. Next, Ontario Graduate Scholarship. So this is a merit-based scholarship available to everyone. So it doesn't have to be a research-based program. For example, I graduated from the Master of Social Work and I got an OGS, Ontario Graduate Scholarship, in my first year. So generally it's $5,000 per term or per semester. So if you're in the first year of a program, you generally get $15,000 for the first 3 semesters. So from fall, winter, and summer, and then $10,000 if it's only a 2-semester program, or if you're in the second year of that graduate program. You can reapply. So if you get a first year, you can get it for a second year for a master's, so up to 2 years for a master's and up to 4 years for a doctoral program. It's available to all students, so not just Canadian citizens or PRs, but also for international students, which is great. It's only available at Ontario schools. So it's only for example, U of T, York, Ryerson, University of Ottawa, Lakehead, Windsor. If you're going outside of Ontario, it won't apply.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, does this scholarship apply also to professional programs or only to, I guess I'm not really sure about the difference in scholarships for like graduate programs versus professional programs.
Yep, so it applies to professional programs as well. So for examal, when I was so the social work program here at U of T is a course-based, practicum-based program. So there's no research involved in that, but I was able to get it. So it definitely applies to professional programs as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The key thing is check with each school, and specifically, I think for U of T and also probably other schools, check with each department about the deadlines because they will all be different. Generally, it'll be sometime in January, February, and March. So now is a great time to start looking at it now and be able to prepare your applications beforehand. Some departments may also have one-on-one writing support. So again, I'm also social work. They have a writing center there, and they have people there who are more than happy to meet with you to talk about your application for the OGS for their particular program. So making sure that if you are able to access those resources whenever you can, also talk to myself and also to the writing center at Vic as well. And that actually goes for all of your graduate application and your scholarship applications as well. So in terms of the OGS applications, they require transcripts. They also require a list of your scholarships and awards. It's also, if you're able to talk about your research contributions in terms of research assistants, positions, publications, presentations, or any research project that you're a part of. They also require a plan of study. So depending on the program, so Alexis was asking about the professional program. If it's a research-based program, they want to know more about your description of your proposed research project. Or if you're in a professional program, talk a bit more about what do you propose to study during the period of award. So talking about what classes you're thinking of taking, what streams you're thinking of taking, what kind of specific programs that you want to go to within your award, within the time that you have the award. So at U of T, they have a lot of collaborative programs that are here. So if you want to go into a collaborative program, feel free to talk about that program as part of your program of study. They also require 2 references, and then depending on the school, again, each school will have a little bit different application process and what they ask for. Some of them may also want to know more information about your other experiences. So at U of T, for instance, they want to know more about your interpersonal skills, your work experience, your volunteer experience, your club engagement. So making sure that you talk about that as well to have a holistic and comprehensive application. Any questions about the OGS?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so if we're applying to all these things with all these references, like at what point is it annoying to ask someone for like 5 reference letters? Or is it not? Like, is there like a social protocol there?
I'll say the protocol would be to give them a lot of notice, and if it's annoying to them, they'll let you know. So if they can't write you 5 reference letters, they'll let you know that, okay, thanks for letting me know. I can only write 3 letters. Let me know which ones you want me to write for. And I'll say it never hurts to ask, because you will always get a no if you never ask. But if you ask, you may get a yes. So don't be afraid to ask, as long as you are able to explain why you're applying for all these different things, and they'll understand why you're asking them for the references. So don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of like the writing supports you're talking about at Victoria College and just in the University of Toronto in general, how, like, do we have access to them after we graduate, or is it just during our period at graduation until grad?
That I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. I know for the central office for the Career Center here at U of T, you have access 2 years after you graduate.
Okay.
With the Writing Center, I'm not sure. I can double check. Yeah.
And what about with the staff at like, just like with you or with the staff at Vic Ready, for example?
I think for that, it's sort of on a case-by-case basis. I will say that I have talked to a couple of recent graduates.
Mhm.
So if that's something that you want to pursue, let me know, and then we can see if we can work something out.
Okay.
I had another question also. I'm not sure if I misunderstood this or not, but so these applications for the OGS, for example, they go in before you know if you got into the graduate program that you applied for?
Yep.
Ooh, okay.
And hopefully you will get to know the results before you say yes to one of these programs.
Oh, okay. I see.
Because yeah, I imagine the OGS, if you get an award, that will probably be one of the big factors in terms of picking which school you want to go to. So
Right. Okay, I understand.
yeah. And then even if you say yes to a school and you find out a month later that, oh, I actually got an award for this school, it's okay to say, oh, actually I changed my mind because something else happened. So even if you say yes to a program, you are not completely committing to a program. So
Okay, got it. And you said the application deadline for these was sometime in January?
generally winter semester, but double check because some of them might be in December. It's hard to say. There's basically every department has different allocations for OGS, and every single department has a different deadline. So it's all over the place. And then just some other words to think about. So these are, the first 2 ones are PhD ones, so Banting and Vanier. If you're thinking of Oxford, the Rhodes Scholarship. McGill just got a brand new scholarship called the McCall-McBain Scholarship. That this year is their first cycle of the scholarship. There's also the Moss Scholarship that's offered at U of T. There's a lot of winners at Vic. So for example, the 2020 award was given to a Vic student. And I think 2 of the 4 finalists were also Vic students. So Vic students in general have been doing really well with the Moss Scholarship. On Quercus, I'll also send the slides out as well afterwards. But this is a link to the registrar's office here at Vic, and they have a list of scholarships that are available for you to apply for. Student awards is good if you're just looking in general for different awards that are available. And the one here is for U of T, but every school in general will have an awards page of some sort that you can look to. Other parts of funding packages. So it's not just awards and scholarships. It's also looking at TAships, so teaching assistant opportunities that can sort of offset your tuition. It may not be giving you like a check, but it can likely be something around they will take a certain portion off your tuition. There's also research assistant positions available. Those might be taking a part of your tuition. They may also be something that you that's like a part-time job as well. So depending on look at what the offer is. Also looking for TAships and RAships, look at how many hours a week you're working. So making sure that it's feasible so that you can still continue to go to school, do well in your classes, and be able to continue to hold on to the TAships and RAships. If you're looking to go into a PhD at some point, there's also course instructing positions as well. Teaching experience is great, but just make sure you don't overload yourself early on. So hopefully now you have a sort of a decent idea of sort of what is your limit and what is your boundary in terms of going to school, working, and also taking care of yourself, and making sure that you continue to know those boundaries and your limits as you go into graduate school, because that can be intensified at times depending on the program that you're in. Especially if you're in a research-based program, it can really hard not to just not think about research at any point in your life. So
Can I ask one more question?
yeah, for sure.
So when you say contact your department, you mean for the Ontario scholarship? Like, can you, what's the context in which we're contacting them?
So the main thing for that one, first one, is to go to the OGS website for U of T. And on there, they'll have I think it's generally like a Google sheet, like a spreadsheet that has a list of all the departments and their deadlines. So the main thing is they want to find out what the deadline is for their OGS application.
Got you. Thank you.
And also on the OGS website, they also have the list of criteria that they are looking for in the application as well. So you can get a sense of what they're looking for. But thank you for joining us for the first session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you want to stay and just chat amongst each other or chat with me, or if you want to talk about something besides school, feel free to stay around. But thank you again.